Wha Where are we? Why can't I feel my legs? I shouted. My wife gripped my hand harder than the times she was in labor, tears streaming down her exhausted face. She was trying to speak, but nothing was coming out. As I looked around, I began to realize tubes and fluids were coming in and out of every limb of my body. And there were monitors all around me, hissing and beeping. Next thing I knew, a doctor with a stern look on his face barged in the cold, darkened room and gave me news so terrifying. I began to shake uncontrollably. John, you were minutes away from being pronounced dead. You were in a diabetic coma. Your blood sugar level was so high you should have died. But you're not in the clear yet. I've never felt so much fear and disappointment in my life. The thought of my kids growing up without their father, and my wife, widowed, all on her own. It made me realize, once and for all, I lost complete control of my life and health. My youngest, my 5-year-old daughter Stephanie, hugged me, looked me in my eyes and said, "Daddy, what's wrong with you?" At that moment I realized I could not let this disease take my life. Not now. Not ever. Upon returning home from the hospital, as we were sitting for dinner, I sat there in shock, hands shaking, sweating. I could not believe the look of sadness and fear that my family had in their eyes. By the time night rolled around and we sent the kids to bed, they each kissed and hugged me before bed. But when they said, "I love you," it sounded like they were saying goodbye, as if it was the last time they'd ever see me again. I know this isn't a very pretty picture, but here's the good news. That single life-threatening event ended up being a blessing in disguise. This secret is so powerful, it has transformed my life. It lowered my A1C to a healthy 5.7%, melted pounds of extra weight off my body, and gave me all-day energy. All within just 30 days. My doctors were speechless, and people who were suffering from type 2 diabetes became desperate to know this secret. And you can start using this simple secret once you understand the truth about diabetes. Listen, you've been lied to your whole life. Multiple studies, including one published in the renowned New England Journal, have found that you cannot control diabetes with medications or insulin, because they do not treat the root cause of type 2 diabetes. They simply treat the symptoms. Plus, new studies have shown that these remedies can actually make your diabetes even worse, and even increase your chances of death. If you are interested, please click the link below the video. But by using the natural secret you're about to learn in this short presentation, something that has only been known to an indigenous tribe in a small Asian country, you can quickly target the root cause of type 2 diabetes and get perfect blood sugar numbers in as little as 30 days, without the dangerous side effects of pharmaceutical drugs. To be clear, this secret is not a new drug. It has nothing to do with eating gag-inducing meals. Nor does it involve injecting yourself with a better version of insulin. It's a completely natural and 100% safe way that's guaranteed to turn your life around. And I've made this presentation because this secret is just too important to hide. Especially when the misinformation perpetrated by mainstream medicine is ruining lives and bleeding people dry of money. But it stops here. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you why everything you heard from your doctors about type 2 diabetes is wrong. You'll be infuriated to know how giant pharmaceutical corporations rob you of your money, and how simple it actually is to lower your blood sugar, and attain healthy body weight, protect yourself from heart disease, and reverse type 2 diabetes. You'll also hear why controlling your blood sugar using meds and insulin makes you even more vulnerable to heart disease, strokes and kidney damage. And finally, if you stay with me till the end, I will reveal how you can naturally and safely reverse your type 2 diabetes in 30 days, along with all the studies and research that proves it works. This secret is so effective, it has already helped 43,897 people become free of their type 2 diabetes. And it doesn't matter how long you've been struggling with blood sugar. or if you come from a family of bad genetics. If you apply this secret, I guarantee, the next time you visit your doctor, he'll be delighted to say, your numbers are perfect. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Now, I understand you might be skeptical. And given that there's no shortage of fad diets and health hacks out there, I don't blame you. In fact, when I discovered this secret, I was skeptical too. But if you hear me out, you'll see everything I'm saying here is 100% true. So make sure you read this presentation now, because it's burning a giant big hole in Big Pharma's profits. And their lawyers are doing everything in their power to take this website down. So silent your phone, get a pen and paper, and make sure to watch this presentation till the end. This is your chance to be diabetes-free once and for all. Hi. My name is John Guttridge. I don't have a medical degree, I'm not a certified nutritionist, nor am I one of those online gurus. I'm just a regular person like you. I'm office manager and I live in Springfield, Illinois with my beautiful wife, 2 sons and a daughter. And, unlike most doctors and experts who never suffered from type 2 diabetes themselves, I know exactly what it's like to live with this disease. My story is extremely painful, but I think you can relate with some of it. It all started in my late 30s when I started gaining weight for the first time. My kids used to point at my belly and joke that I looked pregnant. I didn't take it seriously, and simply brushed it off as part of aging. But other problems soon began to pop their ugly heads, robbing me of my health. I started feeling sluggish and tired all day. Headaches were becoming common as months went by. My brain wouldn't function properly after meals. And then one summer, I noticed that I would always feel dehydrated but was still visiting the toilet more than usual. So, upon my wife's suggestion, I decided to talk to my doctor about these problems. And after some tests, I was hit with the life-changing news. You have type 2 diabetes. And so it began, years upon years of being fed pills and injections as my physical and mental health withered away. As the days passed by, I kept gaining more and more weight. My energy levels lowered to the point it became difficult to do simple household tasks. Brain fog crept in, making it impossible to think clear. And physical issues kept popping up every now and then. So what did my doctor do to fix this? More pills and stronger doses. And for a middle-class family like us, these meds were a huge financial drain. Yet, it felt as if those meds weren't helping at all. I went from a decent 182 pounds to a whopping 263 pounds. My blood pressure was going through the roof. And I felt so tired that walking up the stairs to my bedroom seemed like a monumental task. My doctor couldn't explain any of this. If you are interested, please click the link below the video. He always gave a vague answer, it's common among diabetics. I didn't have the slightest idea why my health was deteriorating, even though I was doing everything my doctor had told me to. Not to mention how these meds were financially draining us. And on my 43rd birthday, it all came crashing down. After a nice lunch with my family, I went outside to water the lawn. That's when I felt a rush of heat over my body, my knees buckled, and I fainted. Next thing I knew, I woke in the hospital being told that I went through a diabetic coma. The high level of sugar had dehydrated my body, hindering some of my body's systems to function properly. Luckily, I recovered safely from this incident. But it was at this point that I decided to make a change. I wanted to raise our children with my wife. Wanted to see them grow up, graduate from college, and get married. And I wanted to grow old with my wife and travel the world just like we had planned. There was no way I was going to miss out on all these wonderful experiences. No. I was going to find a way to fix this problem no matter what. But I had to act fast. The doctor had warned me about the dangers of another episode of uncontrolled blood sugar. So, I ran a race against time. And began researching a way to reverse my type 2 diabetes. I started with a simple question. What causes diabetes? I knew the problem was high blood sugar, but I wanted to know what causes high blood sugar in the first place. It's something called insulin resistance. You might have heard about it. Insulin is the hormone that helps your cells absorb blood sugar so they can use it to produce energy. When your cells become insulin resistant, they stop accepting the sugar from your blood, which leaves all the sugar floating around in your blood, giving rise to high blood sugar. To combat this, you need to take medications, usually metformin, that slow down the release of glucose production in the liver so your blood sugar doesn't rise too high. But here's something mind-blowing. Around 5 to 10% of people stop responding to their meds every year, and need to either take insulin injections, or stronger meds that force the pancreas to produce more insulin. Releasing more insulin in your blood counters insulin resistance by forcing your cells to open up and take in all the sugar from your blood. The stronger the insulin resistance in your cells, the more insulin is needed to help your cells absorb blood sugar. So my next question was, what causes insulin resistance? You see, my doctor had always told me that diabetes was a result of obesity, and that if I reduced my weight, my insulin resistance would go away, which would allow me to manage my blood sugar with a lower dose of meds. But, as I found out, this isn't the case. See, it was always theoretically assumed that obesity causes insulin resistance. But studies have shown that only 80% of diabetics are overweight or obese, whereas the remaining 20% have ideal body weight. So the whole notion that obesity causes insulin resistance, which in turn leads to diabetes, is false. Finding this information actually gave me a sense of relief. I always thought that diabetes was my fault, that I had been careless, and that my family wouldn't have to go through any emotional pain if I had taken better care of myself. Turns out, it was never my fault. Just like it's not your fault either. And I later found out that weight gain is actually a result of insulin resistance, not the other way around. You see, insulin is an anabolic, pro-growth, fat-storing hormone. Generally, the higher it is, the more your body will store fat. And since insulin levels are higher in people who suffer from insulin resistant, putting on extra fat is inevitable. In fact, research from the United Kingdom Prospective Diabetes Study (UKPDS) showed that the average person with type 2 diabetes gains about 9 pounds in their first 3 years of using insulin. Interesting, isn't it? But even though I had discovered a lot of interesting information, my research did not lead me to find a better solution that would help me control my blood sugar or reverse the insulin resistance. I did my best. I read journals, visited libraries, spoke to researchers, visited universities, you name it. I even spoke to other diabetics, holistic doctors, and even visited online forums looking for some type of remedy or suggestion that would help me. But I couldn't find any answer. After weeks of research, I still had no clue what to do. Until I met a man named Eric on a diabetes forum. Eric had worked for a giant pharmaceutical corporation for 15 years. Until one day he was fired for speaking against the company's unethical practices. Having a chat with him was an eye-opening experience. Over the call, Eric said he was fired because he had discovered that lowering blood sugar with meds or insulin does not control diabetes. And that it will never save you from complications like heart diseases or kidney damage. If you are interested, please click the link below the video. Health issues that are hallmarks of diabetes. I was taken back a bit, considering how bizarre this claim was. I always thought keeping blood sugar in normal range helps prevent all the health complications of diabetes. But Eric explained how mainstream medicine completely misses the point. You see, he had discovered something called insulin toxicity, which is a result of taking strong doses of meds or insulin to control blood sugar. Everybody's focused on blood sugar levels, but nobody's paying attention to insulin levels, was his argument. Doctors have been taught to follow this rule. The higher the insulin resistance, the higher the dose of meds or insulin you need to take to lower blood sugar. But what this does is floods your body with huge amounts of insulin, which can cause a lot of damage. Look. As weird as it sounds, insulin toxicity might actually be worse than high blood sugar, he added. Now, I wasn't believing any of this. None of the doctors and experts I talked to during my research had mentioned anything remotely like this. But then he began talking about all the studies and scientific proof. The UK General Practice Database studied more than 84,000 newly diagnosed diabetics between 2000 and 2010. They found that patients who were treated with insulin had an A1C level of 6.0%, which was considered as a healthy level. Had just as poor health as patients who were not treated with insulin and had an A1C of 10.5%, which is considered as a dangerously high level. Plus, treatment with insulin increased the risk of death by heart disease by 200%, instead of lowering it. And the odds were just the same for strokes, cancer, and kidney disease. This meant insulin reduced blood glucose but not heart disease or death. Another study, in Saskatchewan, Canada, a review of more than 12,000 newly diagnosed diabetic patients found a significant and graded association between mortality risk and insulin level. The researchers discovered that the patients with high insulin levels in their blood had a 279% higher risk of death compared to the low insulin level patients. A similar Dutch database associated daily high doses of insulin with 300% higher risk of cardiovascular disease. There have been animal studies too, some as early as 1949, that demonstrated insulin treatment leads to early atherosclerosis, the hardening of arteries, which is a precursor to heart attacks and strokes. All these studies prove one thing. The more the insulin in your blood, the higher the risk of dying. In other words, treating insulin resistance and thus type 2 diabetes by flooding the blood with insulin is not good, it's bad. This is why diabetes kills one person every 6 seconds. Most likely because of insulin toxicity. Here's why you'll never trust the FDA again. If you are interested, please click the link below the video. The National Institutes of Health in the United States funded a massive randomized study in 1999. They recruited 10,000 participants who were type 2 diabetics and were considered at high risk for heart attack and stroke. Half of the participants were given a low dose of meds and insulin, and the other half were given a higher dose of meds and insulin. When the results were published in 2008, the researchers couldn't believe their eyes. While the participants in the second group had normal blood sugar levels, and the participants in the first group had high blood sugar levels. Participants in the second group were dying at a faster rate than the first group. Why? Because the participants in the second group had high insulin levels, compared to the participants in the first group. The results were clear: forcing blood sugar to normal levels by increasing insulin dose was killing people faster than the high blood sugar itself. And yet, even though the NIH had proof in front of their eyes all this time, neither they nor the FDA have warned doctors or diabetics about the dangers of insulin toxicity. In fact, the US Food and Drug Administration (FDA) approved all of the 30 new drugs that came to the market between 2004 to 2013 based on a single point: the ability to lower blood sugar. They haven't checked them for insulin toxicity, increased risk of heart attacks, strokes, blindness, or other complications. I was shocked to hear all this. But the scientific proof was undeniable. Eric was right. Insulin toxicity is more fatal than high blood sugar. So I asked him, why hasn't the medical establishment warned us about the dangers of insulin toxicity? Eric replied, it's simple. Diabetes is a cash cow for everyone involved in the industry. He explained to me how pharmaceutical giants have bribed officials and politicians so they can force their expensive drugs upon innocent diabetics. One of the best examples of this corruption is the broadening of the definition of type 2 diabetes in 2010. The reason being to help with early diagnosis and treatment. But this was just a disguise to increase the sales of diabetes drugs. You see, this new definition of type 2 diabetes would allow doctors to prescribe meds even to people who were pre-diabetic. What the public didn't know is that the majority of the decision makers on these panels received several $1 million every year from companies that make diabetes drugs, as part of consulting fees. In one case, 13 of 19 members of a committee received more than $2 million since 2009 from companies that make diabetes drugs. You see, diabetes drugs are a torrent of money for Big Pharma. It's one of their top sources of revenue. In 2013, sales of diabetes drugs had reached $23 billion, which is more than the combined revenue of the National Football League, Major League Baseball, and the National Basketball Association. Eric also mentioned that working in the industry for 15 years made him realize something. Most Big Pharma executives have no concern about the health of Americans. All they care about is money. They simply want to sell us their drugs so they can buy cars, houses and yachts from our money, he said. I was starting to see his point. With so much money to make, what's stopping these companies from bribing officials to hide the truth? I was infuriated when I found out about this. Who knows what else the medical establishment was hiding from the public? This conversation finally made me see the only solution to be diabetes-free. Fix insulin resistance. This was the only way I could control my blood sugar, as well as avoid meds and insulin, which can result in insulin toxicity. So I asked Eric the important question, how to reverse insulin resistance. Unfortunately, he had no answer to this. I'm sorry, John. I told you everything I knew. It was here that I had hit a dead end. I did not know what to do. And I was starting to give up hope as my health continued to dwindle. I knew it was just a matter of time before something bad would happen to me. But soon, a miracle changed everything. I don't know how. Whether it was pure luck, or my children's prayers. But when I visited my brother in Chicago for a weekend, it opened up a big door. And finally led me to discover a solution to eliminate insulin resistance once and for all, while having dinner at a family-owned Burmese restaurant. When I asked our waiter Denpo, who was the owner of the restaurant, what dishes he recommended for diabetes, he took a look at my brother and replied, "Look, I don't say this to anyone, but since you are one of my favorite customers, you should know that you can be diabetes-free." My brother wanted to hear more. Denpo told us how he was from Myanmar and that diabetes was almost non-existent where he came from. Upon asking for more details, he described his culture and lifestyle in his native land. He told us that his indigenous group was called the Kachins, and also mentioned how his country had one of the lowest diabetes rates in the world, and that his indigenous tribe had never reported a case of diabetes. Even people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s were slim, healthy and disease-free, all with healthy blood sugar levels, and no obesity. For me, this was like opening up a Pandora's box. If his tribe were immune to diabetes, then perhaps I can use their secrets and remove diabetes from my life. Unfortunately, the restaurant got busy so we couldn't continue our conversation. But Denpo gave me his number and told me to give him a call as he knew someone that could help me. I felt hope for the first time in years. Hope that there was a solution for my problems. Hope that I can see my children grow up and get married. Hope that I can grow old with my wife, just like I promised her. And more importantly, I can live a healthy, diabetes-free life once again. If you are interested, please click the link below the video. When I called Denpo the next day, he told me about his high school friend Nayan, who had gone on to be a researcher at the University of Medical Technology, Mandalay. Nayan had dedicated his life to diagnosing, treating, and preventing diseases. I contacted Nayan and told him everything about my research and how I was interested in learning the Kachin secrets. "Your research is completely right," he agreed with me. But because of Nayan's native background in Myanmar and his understanding of the Kachin tribe, he had uncovered a lot more information than I had. Here's what he had discovered. The human body will do anything to achieve homeostasis at all costs. Meaning, if things go too far in one direction, the body will go in the opposite direction, to achieve homeostasis. For example, when it's too cold during winter, the body achieves homeostasis by shivering to generate more body heat. Similarly, when we feel too hot during summer, the body achieves homeostasis by sweating to cool itself. The body adapts in order to survive. And one of the ways our bodies adapt is by developing resistance. Let's look at an example. Have you ever watched a homeless person sleep on the side of a busy street? There's too much noise, but he can still sleep peacefully. Why? Because he's been exposed to the noise constantly, and so his body has adapted to it, or, in better words, became resistant to it. On the other hand, a person who sleeps in the silence of his bedroom every night will wake up at the slightest noise, even if the noise is not loud. It's because his body has not been constantly exposed to noise during sleep. And so, his body has not developed resistance to the noise. In simple words, being exposed to high and prolonged levels of anything forces the body to become resistant to it. If you drink a beer every day, you'll soon discover that one beer doesn't do it for you anymore. And you'll need to drink more to feel the same effect. Insulin acts in the same way. It acts upon hormone receptors just like alcohol, and develops the same phenomenon of resistance. In a study published in Diabetologia, the official journal of the European Association for the Study of Diabetes (EASD), a 40-hour constant insulin infusion into a group of healthy young people increased insulin resistance by 15%. Meaning, these healthy people became insulin resistant simply because they were constantly given insulin. In another study, this one published in the official journal of American Diabetes Association, Diabetes Care, diabetic patients who were not taking insulin initially, were given a very high dose of 100 units of insulin per day to maintain normal blood sugar. The researchers found that the higher the insulin dose, the more insulin resistance they developed. And because insulin resistance is the root cause of diabetes, diabetes in these patients got worse even though blood glucose remained in the normal range. These studies show that anyone can become insulin resistant, if they get enough insulin. Bottom line, too much insulin causes insulin resistance. This is the root cause of diabetes. And this is why diabetes gets progressively worse over time. It's like giving more alcohol to an alcoholic, or getting more sun to treat sunburns. It's stupid. And it's wrong. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is, maintaining normal insulin levels can reverse insulin resistance. Because, when you remove the stimulus, your body lets go of the resistance. In our example of the homeless person, if he starts sleeping in a quiet bedroom, his body will soon drop all the resistance to the loud street noise. And in a few weeks, he will also wake up at the slightest noise. You see, the right way to reduce insulin resistance and thus reverse type 2 diabetes is to lower both blood glucose and insulin at the same time. Not just blood glucose. Nyan went on to explain, I have been studying the Kachin people for years. They might not be as scientifically advanced as Americans or Europeans, but unknowingly, they do things that control their insulin resistance. And because of this they remain diabetes-free. It was clear that Nyan had done his research. He knew what he was talking about. And based on his research of the Kachin tribe, he had already developed a 30-day protocol to reverse diabetes. It was a natural way to control blood glucose and reverse insulin resistance. Without meds or insulin. Without gag-inducing meals. And without doing hours of cardio in the gym. All one had to do was make a few changes in their lifestyle. He asked me if I was willing to try it. I'll admit, I still had my doubts, but it all sounded good in theory. And more importantly, I had no other choice. The doctor had clearly mentioned that the next episode of uncontrolled blood sugar could kill me. And given that medications and insulin can cause insulin toxicity, using them to control my diabetes was out of the question. Plus, this protocol was completely natural, which meant it had no harmful side effects whatsoever. So, I agreed to it. Nyan was confident about the life-changing potential of his 30-day system. He explained the protocol over the phone, outlining things I had to do. The instructions were easy to understand. If you are interested, please click the link below the video.